introductions. I'm Stacey Briscoe. I'm a wine journalist and an editor, and I am the editorial consultant for Wine Industry Network. And what we're talking about is how COVID-19 has impacted trade market visits. So meeting with distributors, restaurant wine buyers, sommeliers, you name it. There's been a lot of discussion about DTC channels, so talking to consumers and getting your wines to market that way, hosting webinars and virtual tastings. But we want to touch on how this is affecting your relationship with wine industry trade. So we have Kim Stare Wallace from Dry Creek Vineyard. She is the president of the winery. And we have Sara Rathbun, who is the director of marketing for Dry Creek Vineyard. So let's just jump in, and either one of you want to just start talking about what you guys have done to help your trade market program.
Okay, well, I'll just jump in. I will say that this technology, the ability to engage with people virtually, has really been a positive aspect of our marketing and sales and just, our efforts over the last 4 months. I don't know what we would have done had we not had this ability. And I think it's important for people to know that we didn't really use this technology at all. A few employees, we had occasional Zoom sales meetings with our sales team who are located throughout the country, but I certainly didn't know how to operate it. And so, the adage that you can teach an old dog new tricks, or you can't teach an old dog new tricks, really isn't true. So we've jumped into this wholeheartedly. I think to date I've done almost something like 25 virtual experiences. It's a lot. Usually we're doing 2 or 3 a week. And it's not just me, it's also my winemaker and of course our sales team and our regional sales team. But there's definitely been some things that we've learned along the way. And I'll start with kind of what I think are the basics. And none of this was laid out for us. It's been definitely a school of hard knocks. But I would say one of the most important things is to have someone on your team who has some knowledge of technology. And here we have Sara. I could not do this without Sara. You've got, she's been invaluable. I really couldn't be doing this without her. And I think what we've learned is it really does take 2 people to pull these experiences off without a hitch, because no matter how seamless you think it's going to go, invariably there's going to be some hiccup. It could be someone interrupting you as you're giving your spiel. And so Sara will run out and say, no, don't come in. But anyway, have somebody that's knowledgeable to help out. Real basic, you've got to kind of create a set or a scene that represents your brand. Now, typically I like to do some kind of a virtual experience, whether it's a tasting or whatever, in the tasting room. And it's really pretty in there. And we kind of discovered that when the tasting room was closed, it was quiet. There was no one in there. And Sara would set up the laptop and we had this very pretty backdrop and it worked great. But now that we've reopened the tasting room and we have people in there periodically, we've had to relocate our set. So I'm now literally in the corner of our cellar. It's freezing cold in here, but we've sort of set up this little mock, I don't know what you would call it, look back here so that it's reasonably attractive. And we have the flowers and we have the etched big bottle. And I think I'm sitting kind of tall today, but if I were sitting a little bit shorter and I had raised the screen, you would see the barrels behind me. So we tried to create a set that was attractive. You do have to have the right equipment. For us, it's just simply a matter of a computer, but we've had to buy a microphone. We bought what's called a Diva Light, which was, I don't know, what was that, $99, Sara, maybe?
Something like that.
Super cheap. We bought, for the laptop we use, we have a sound bar. We did buy a Bluetooth mic, which we haven't really had to use a lot. But so we had a very minimal investment. One of the things that I think Sara and I both really recommend is that people familiarize themselves with the whole feature, whether you're using Zoom or some other platform. Tinker around with it a little bit. Make sure make sure that your name is listed properly. I see mine says Kim. Maybe I should have probably put Kim Stare Wallace, right? But make sure you know how to use a chat feature, etc. Let's see. I think one of the other things that we've learned is make sure that whoever is you're partnering with on this experience, that they really understand the technology. So make sure, in our case, we like to host them ourselves because I know I have Sarah and she knows what she's doing. We've actually partnered, we've done like virtual wine dinners or virtual tastings with an account who set it up, and they said they knew what they were doing, but in fact, we had kind of a funny thing happen recently. I was doing a virtual dinner with a restaurant, and a lovely restaurant, lovely chef, but 40 minutes into it, Sarah?
Yeah, 40 minutes. They had a free Zoom account. They didn't have a license. And so that has a 40-minute time limit. So after 40 minutes, the entire Zoom ended. And so we were able to have a few people join us back in the Zoom, but it definitely interrupted the flow and we lost a few people in the interim.
So we kind of know now that we like to host these experiences, and it's because we can have the most control that we can. And even having said that, there's always something that you're kind of, is out of your control. But I think crossing your T's and dotting your I's is really important. Sarah, does anything else come to mind with respect to just, kind of the background?
Yeah, I can't stress enough that practice is so incredibly important. Even from sharing your screen to show a PowerPoint, making sure that you have your slides on the correct screen, making sure that you're not getting flashing backgrounds or showing something inadvertently that you didn't realize you were. That can definitely happen. So practicing. I remember once Kim and I walked around the entire winery on my laptop, just so she could see where the Wi-Fi would reach. So we knew exactly on property what our limitations were. We would love to be able to go in the vineyard, but our Wi-Fi doesn't reach there. So having those kind of practice opportunities and really taking the time to dial in the best combination really sets you up for success.
Yeah, exactly. Really quickly on, we learned that. So when I'm doing let's just say a virtual tasting for an account, it's really similar to a winemaker dinner. You tell the history of the winery, our family story. I talk about the Dry Creek Valley, and I'm just verbally talking. But we learned really quickly that if Sarah can throw up some of the wonderful historic photos that we have that makes our winery special, especially in today's world, it makes my storytelling come alive. And so when we first started doing it, Sarah, do you remember? I think you put instead of a slide that was like a vineyard shot, you kept putting up a map of the sales team. And so I'm in the tasting room trying to do my spiel, and Sarah's in her office, putting up the slides, and she inadvertently grabbed the wrong slide. And so then I got discombobulated. So again, just kind of being prepared and, making sure you have everything queued up. It's like anything, you wouldn't probably walk in to do a winemaker dinner without doing your homework on the obviously the wines and the food pairing and a little bit about the restaurant. And so it actually really requires some practice and research. I would say another thing that has been a learning curve, and anybody who wears glasses will chuckle, is so one of the hardest things for me is the visual, basically being able to see. So if you wear progressives like I do, I have to kind of tilt my nose up to really see you. Well, I don't want you to be looking up at my nose. So I have to hold my head down, but I've kind of had to get used to the clarity being, maybe not perfect. So then sometimes if I'm really doing something quite, demanding, I'll wear my computer glasses, which, of course I don't feel like they look as good, but I'll wear them. When I've done, what was it? IG Live. I've done IG Live a few times, which I try to avoid because it's really hard for me to see because it's a tiny little screen, right? It's your cell phone and it's 3 feet out and I'm looking, it just doesn't work well for me. So the visual part of this can be challenging, I think, if somebody wears glasses in particular. Anyway, that's just a side note. So some of the activities, so we've done all kinds of things. So it started out, we were asked to do a virtual tasting for a pretty prominent retailer in Indianapolis. And it worked, that was great. Do you remember that, Sarah? And they had put together a promotion of our wines. And if somebody bought, I think it was two bottle of,
two-pack.
Yeah, 2-pack, a bottle of Fumé Blanc and a bottle of Cabernet, and there was some special price. And if you purchased that, you received an invitation to this virtual tasting with me. And they sold a lot of wine. And so we did this virtual tasting, and I don't know, we probably had 60 or 70 people. And it was my first time doing it. And one of the things I liked about that is that the owner of the retailer was the host. So he knew what he was doing. He was able to mute everybody while I was speaking, but he was also able to, engage people when it was time to chat. And it kind of taught us the importance of working with somebody who really kind of understands the technology and has put in place the proper planning. So that particular event, I think we started promoting it 6 weeks out. And what we found is that really it's sort of the partnership of working with the account that works best. So we both benefit. So when they market it to their constituents, or we promote it to our wine club members, or our database, I should say, we are driving traffic to their retail store, right? And their database is being exposed to Dry Creek Vineyard. And so it's kind of a win-win. And I don't know, I can't quite remember. I think we ended up selling, in addition to whatever they sold pre-tasting, we sold an additional something like 25 cases of wine for, an hour and a half worth of work, which is a pretty good, that's a pretty good sale, I think.
And was this a retailer that you had a relationship with previously?
Yes, okay. Yes, exactly. So we like to try to partner with an account that we've already done business with, or that our regional sales manager has some knowledge of. And I think the reason why they like it is we're actually selling wine for them. Mm-hmm. So another virtual tasting that I did that was one of my most favorite, and certainly one of the most successful, was with a country club in Wisconsin. And this was in, mid-March, Sarah. I think it was a couple months ago. And they had put together, so this was a country club, right? Private membership. All the members were friends, hadn't seen each other for a good, say, 6 weeks or maybe longer. And the club put together a little appetizer sort of to-go pack, if you will. I forget what it was. It was like shrimp with, something. And then they also sold a couple of bottles of our wine. So I think it was Chenin Blanc and the Mariner. And the idea was the club members picked it up, took it to their home, and then at a certain designated time, I did the tasting with them. And again, we promoted it well in advance, and it was a great success because not only did the country club manager sell all the wine going into that tasting, he then got an additional orders from all these guests, 39 cases. So, that's a lot of wine to sell, and I don't know what he sold in advance, but he was delighted because remember, this was a club that was basically closed, right? Only doing takeout, and I think it was probably one of the more profitable and successful tastings that he had done. So I'm trying to think. There was another one. I did a couple for some smaller retailers on the East Coast, and one of them was actually a retailer I had visited, so I knew the owner, and she's doing a lot of these with all kinds of different wineries and suppliers. And what was fun is that I actually recognized some of her customers, and we actually had wine club members who also are customers of this retailer. So there's a little bit of familiarity. That was a much smaller tasting. I think there were maybe 20 people. Mm-hmm. So we've dabbled in all kinds of different types of trade account tastings. So and actually I'll add that our winemaker has done some really great educational tastings for somms. So a number of times now, actually quite a few times, Tim has done that. And what's nice about that is that sommeliers, they're really interested and hungry for very technical wine information. Who better to do that than the winemaker? And so Tim, our winemaker, Tim Bell, has been able to get into some pretty, sort of geeky winemaking information at the level that the somms want during a time when they're not busy. Unfortunately, they're not working. And so this is sort of that value added, that providing education. So there wasn't any direct sale as a result of it, but we're building relationships and we're helping educate, future, sommeliers and buyers.
So that, that in a way is building future relationships
Absolutely.
for potential buyers when they get back into their restaurant situation. Do you have insight as to how he was able to kind of cater those specific types of tastings for them? I know you mentioned they were more geeky and educational. Did he provide them with wine samples? Did he take them through the cellar maybe and show them the process? Like what did that entail?
That's a great question. Sarah, you should share with her because you kind of set that one up.
Absolutely. So we were really fortunate that we had a very proactive distributor, for as an example, in Chicago, and somebody who really embraced kind of our wanting to get out into this changed world that we now find ourselves in. And so they were actually very inventive and started doing 2-ounce samples of our wines. And we had a very cute label on it that looked like ours. And so we had that and a few other little goodies delivered to the restaurants, to the sommeliers, or put into the wine locker where they usually get their samples from in downtown Chicago. And they were actually able to taste the wines along with Tim and be able to experience some of it while he was going through this tasting. As far as how he catered it, he just got really in the nitty gritty. He was talking about different clonal techniques, different native yeast species that he uses, different types of inoculations and fermentations that he uses. Exactly.
Showing soil samples.
Showing there's a map right behind Kim that's a topography map. And so really getting into kind of the nitty gritty of where we are and where these vineyards are. And so because it was a forum where it was just high level sommeliers that were participating, they could ask the questions, and I think that they felt a certain amount of freedom being able to really get into those details with him. Whereas if they perhaps were with consumers or even with distributors or other types of server training type of seminars, they wouldn't have that freedom and that flexibility to really ask the questions that they wanted to know about.
Mm-hmm. Have you gotten any feedback from any of the participants yet about how they've used that knowledge or taken it back? I mean, some restaurants are opening, some sommeliers are getting their jobs back. Any feedback from that?
Absolutely. So we've definitely gotten some new placements that we were very excited about. We have further established our relationship. We can look at the case sales and see a direct correlation. And then also we invited some of the wine stewards from, say, a local grocery chain or a local wine chain there, and they have now asked us to present to their entire team and give their entire team education as well. So opening up these doors, creating these relationships in a time where we can't actually be there in person to shake their hand is really remarkable.
Excellent.
It's really important, I think, to have a distributor that is open to this and embraces it. And some do and some don't. Some distributors are just too big and probably don't have the wherewithal. And, but we've realized that where we really excel at this, it's with a distributor that we have a very close relationship with. They're very entrepreneurial. They're in the same boat as we are. They are trying to pivot their business, learn new skills, and jump in with their feet first. And one of the things that I would share with everybody who's listening to avoid, which is something that we've learned, is several times we've offered to do a virtual tasting for, say, West Coast retailers or East Coast accounts, and our regional sales team puts it out there to the distributors. In other words, we sort of promote it to the distributors, saying that, hey, Kim's going to be doing a virtual tasting on XYZ date. This is a great thing to offer to your accounts, blah, blah, blah. And if you don't have, and they haven't had a good level of attendance, and if you don't have that direct partnership with one particular account where we are promoting that account to our consumers, they're promoting the wines and the virtual tasting to their consumers, I just don't think it's as successful. It's just sort of vague. Wouldn't you agree, Sarah?
Yeah, I would say that our most successful virtual experiences, whether it's a tasting or a wine dinner or an educational seminar, has been where there are really clear defined instructions. It's right. Go to this retailer and buy these wines, or go to this restaurant and reserve your takeout, or join us on this date for education about this. The clearer that we can become, the higher attendance that we have, and the more engagement as well. Because when we have kind of vague instructions, our consumers, whether they're trade, whether they're distributors, whether they're accounts or sommeliers, they're not as engaged either, because I don't think they know exactly what they're in for. So having those clear, defined instructions really, really allows us to have a better experience both for us and for the person who's attending.
Can you give an example of maybe one of the more industry-focused experiences that you gave where you had to like very much cater to this audience? The sommelier one was a great one. Is there maybe one for a retailer?
Well, I think probably the blitz idea, right? Would you?
Either that, or I was thinking your Rocky motivational speech.
Oh, right.
You called it.
So Rocky Balboa. Mm-hmm. So I was asked to do a virtual meeting, a discussion, if you will, with one of our distributors in Massachusetts. And at first I thought it was a sales meeting. And I was told, no, they don't want to, we're not tasting wines. It's not a sales meeting. They want to hear, basically sort of how it was like, how have I survived the COVID-19? How do I stay optimistic? How do I stay positive? What are my keys to success? Basically, it was like a motivational speaking engagement. And I remember saying to my sales guy, I said, I'm not a motivational speaker. I'm not sure I'm going to do a good job. Well, I ended up going home and I started to think about it. And I thought, this is an amazing opportunity. Many of these sales reps for the distributor are young, right? Not all of them. And, I do have many, many years of experience in this business. And I thought, what can I share with them? And so I sort of put some thought and time into it. And it turned out to be a really, I think, fun, and I think they really enjoyed it. And I basically shared with them kind of my personal vision, not only for our business, but my own, how do I stay motivated? How do I stay optimistic? I mean, these have been tough times, right? And as a leader, it's very easy to get depressed or get worried, or, how do I avoid that? And I tried to share with them just some of my own personal techniques, and I shared with them some books that I read that I recommend. And I sort of felt like it was like the Rocky Balboa speech. And at the end, it was just a great sort of, rah, rah, love fest. We can do it. We're going to survive. We're going to thrive. And I never would have thought that, that would have been my role, but I really enjoyed it. And I think that that's something that we can all share together. We're all looking for, we need this world, we people, humans, we need positivity more than anything right now, right? And we need to be together. We're a team. We need to support each other. We need to, spread that love. And that's what I tried to do with them. And it worked. Another thing, completely different approach, but we've done it several times now, some more successful than others, but one in particular was wildly successful. So we every year conduct kind of a major market blitz in a particular market. We've done it for 15 years. And again, this is a distributor that's a very long time, distributor of ours that we have a very close relationship with. And every year we fly in a number of people and we blitz the market. Well, this year they decided to do a virtual blitz. And so appointments were made up with about 30 different accounts. Sarah and the team put together these very cute little 2-ounce mini bottles of Dry Creek with little labels on them that were, actually it wasn't Sarah, well, it was actually our distributor, right?
Right. Yep, they were. And so we sent along some goodies to go with it. Mm-hmm.
And so the distributor actually decanted the wine and physically made the bottles, physically delivered the sample bottles to the accounts. And then our team had appointments with these buyers along with the sales rep for that distributor. So for example, let's say you, Stacy, are the buyer for a top restaurant and Sarah is the representative from the winery. And then I was the buyer for the restaurant. So we would do literally an account call just like this. Well, it took place over the course of 3 days. Mm-hmm. I think there were like 30 calls, right?
Yep, just about.
We did a kickoff sales meeting with the distributor sales force to begin the week, just like we would do in person. And, we did the rah-rah thing. Everybody had their appointments. And then we did a follow-up or end of week sort of rah-rah distributor sales meeting, if you will, to wrap up the blitz. And here's the staggering thing. And I won't give you the exact numbers, but we sold more wine this year in that week during COVID-19 than last year by flying in 4 people and incurring the additional expenses of airplanes, hotels, dining, etc. So we saved a significant amount of money and sold more wine.
Okay, so two follow-up questions then for you. And the first one is, knowing that, are you going to do it again next year?
I mean, you mean if we are, I would say probably. I mean, it's going to fundamentally change the way we, look at not only that particular event, or that activity, but also just even travel in general. We learned, it was really quite staggering. Sarah, you were really heavily involved. What else was?
Yes, it was a never-ending Zoom meeting for 3 days. I think one of the keys that was so successful just happened to be the coincidence that a lot of the buyers weren't busy at the moment.
Right.
That's the other thing is a lot of times I show up and I'm in a line of 10 people waiting to present their wines, or they cancel on you, or they have to make a different appointment on a different day. And so having that same scenario that everyone happens to be in their stores, they don't have customers coming in, or they're really taking the time to go through their inventory, really gave us an opportunity to jump on it. So as far as future timing goes, I would personally say we have to kind of see what the market is looking for. We have to see if people are open, and if they are busy, it might be better to be there in person, but it certainly seems like having this flexibility of being able to cater to their schedule really added a lot to it. I had a few very early in the morning. I had a few very late at night. I had one on a Saturday, just because that worked better with their schedule. And I would have never been able to do that if I was there in person. I would have had a plane to catch on Friday. I wouldn't have been there for that Saturday appointment. So I think there's two sides to it. But I think it's definitely worth exploring, and something that I think we will be continuing with our business practices going forward.
And did you find that because specific appointments were made, that you were able to cater to their personality or their specific needs more acutely than if you had been there in person? And like you said, you're waiting in line, basically you're tired, he's tired, she's tired, they're tired, and then you get there and you're kind of like, Dry Creek Wines, like, here you go. Did you find you were a little bit more dynamic and a little bit more personable with them?
It's interesting because I actually found a lot of freedom, because I was really able to say that, okay, we have this, 45 minutes to an hour that we can just spend going into whatever you want to. Whereas if I was on an account, it's quick, get out, get moving on the line. So I was really able to take the time, and actually having it be a Zoom meeting where I could refer to things on my computer. I was able to bring up photos of when we're talking about Semillon and Sauvignon Gris and Sauvignon Muscat. I can show them a picture of those different clones that they might not have ever seen before. So it was actually able to be, I think, a more dynamic, as you're saying, experience for both of us, that I had extra tools in my toolbox, little tricks that I could show. And they had a really specific time that they had already committed to giving to me to be able to tell the story. And so I think that having that effort of being able to give them a complete package, not only with their tasting materials, but also with the interactive electronic capabilities, it really made for a kind of special, almost an intimate experience, if that makes sense. It was just like this. It's just us here. There's no distractions. And I felt like it really helped form more genuine relationships.
Well, and most of them, they were at home. Everybody was at home, right?
Yeah, most of them were at home. Some of them were in their stores just doing inventory and things like that. But that was the thing, is they had a dedicated time that they could spend on their computer that they had already committed to me. So, they didn't have other distractions. So it was a really great opportunity to tell the story and like I said, use visual aids. That's a picture's worth 1,000 words. And now I have a bunch. That's
what's so nice about Zoom. The time I would just one of the stories I want to tell is about my experience with the Facebook Live. So we, not too long ago, a regional retailer in New England, who is a very good customer of ours, this was their first, virtual tasting for their customers. And it was really great. It was great because they're a very significant retail chain. And so I was very excited to do it, but they chose to use Facebook Live. And first of all, Facebook Live, I don't care for it because you are staring at the screen at yourself the whole time and just talking to yourself. You can't see anybody. It's very strange. But I was probably 10 or 15 minutes into my, presentation, talking about the winery and my history and all this. And all of a sudden, the digital marketing person for the store contacted Sarah and said that their Facebook app had malfunctioned and there was no audio and nobody could hear me. And I was just going like, and of course, I find this out while people are looking at me. I'm sure they saw the color drain out of my face. Then we had to start the whole thing over. And we ended up losing a bunch of, people dropped off of the call because by the time we got it started again, it was, 20 minutes into it. So I am not a fan of Facebook Live. I think for maybe 2 or 3 minute segments where you're just going on, talking about something, maybe a winery update, but to really sort of do a virtual tasting or kind of like a seminar, I would not recommend that platform at all.
Yeah, and that's really a tricky one because then you get into taking over somebody else's business feed, and there's a lot of different permissions that you need to get, and there's some interesting nuances to taking over someone else's business feed, whether it's on Instagram or Facebook, and so it adds definitely a level of pressure and a level of errors that's potentially there to make.
Mm-hmm. But to your point, Kim, Zoom's only as helpful as you make it to be, right? You have to learn all the little buttons to press, and
you really do.
Like Sarah wouldn't have been able to share, photos if she didn't know how to screen share or, drop photos in or, all that good stuff.
Exactly. No, it just seems to provide the maximum flexibility, and it has worked the best for us for sure.
Yeah, I will say one key to, I think, our success for engaging, whether it's with consumers or with the trade, has been that second person. I think it's a really great way that I can monitor the chat, I can monitor the Q&As, I can do all of that so that Kim can speak directly to the consumer. There's a lot of webinars or virtual tastings that I've seen that a lot of people just tend to drop off of because two people, for example, might just be speaking to each other the whole time and they're ignoring the audience. They're ignoring those questions and they're not addressing the people by name. Stacey, that's a great question. Let me answer that for you. And so I think that there is also that nuance to it that really, the importance of it just cannot be stressed enough.
Yeah, it's interesting how something like that, again, can make it feel more personal or intimate. And it baffles me because, you think of being in person as being more personal and personable, but being able to cater to a large audience, but still be able to pull out that name and say like, oh, so-and-so asked a question or so-and-so brought up a great point. Let's discuss.
No, it's really a skill. I mean, when you're, chatting away and telling your story and doing your presentation, and then, let's say you have 20 comments in the chat, right? And then 25. It's very hard to read those and talk and not get discombobulated. I mean, it's definitely multitasking. And so if you have someone like I do with Sarah, who's able to read those and say, Kim, there's a great question. Why do we call it Fumé Blanc? Or, what's the history of, why are there sailboats on your labels? And so then it cues me to say, oh, I'm so glad you said that. Because otherwise I would be squinting and, trying to figure it out.
And so I know Sarah obviously is your main partner in crime here. Are there any other team members that help you out with any of these digital? I know you mentioned Tim, obviously he's hosting the more technical seminars, but anybody else pitching in here?
Our assistant winemaker has been doing some of these, and our director of sales, and then actually our regional sales managers. But would you not say, Sarah, probably 90% of the time you're helping them? Unless I'm always there as their sidekick to make sure that everything is hosted correctly and that I'm generally on all of them. I'm the person showing the photos and being the moderator, I guess it would be. And that seems to be working really well for everyone, whether it's from home or at the winery. It really helps just to have that person to help keep moving things along for timing also, especially with our distributors. I'd say that that's a really big difference that I've noticed is in our distributor sales meetings that we're doing for these types of activities. They're a lot shorter. A lot of times if we're doing a GSM, we're doing, 15 minutes, 20 minutes. It's not a full hour-long tasting that you would expect if you were a consumer. So having somebody there that can almost help keep the time for you and keep you on track, I think is also a really valuable asset. Because when you get into these sales teams, these sales meetings, anyone who's worked with the trade will know that you are extremely grateful to have the time that you have. But once your time is up, that's all you get. So it's really important to make the most of it.
So that's really interesting that, you're doing a tasting for a professional and it's 25 minutes max. Whereas if you're with a consumer, you're probably spending about an hour of their time. Can you talk maybe a little bit about how you're able to shorten those down? Like when you're doing a tasting, maybe it's just one wine, maybe it's a flight of wines, but how are you able to keep that short and succinct? Because, they're busy people and they probably have another Zoom meeting with more tastings.
Yeah, I would say, at least from my perspective, and I'm sure Kim has a lot to add here, but I think it goes back to that having a really clear, defined goal. What is it that you're getting out of it? Are you launching a new package? Are you walking through wines that they might need selling tips on?
Mm-hmm.
Are you trying to tell the history of the company, or are you trying to provide a motivational speech? I think having those very clear goals are really going to help you tailor it. But Kim, what would you say?
Well, and I think it's preparing, having an outline. Every single time you do something, you really need to spend, maybe it's just 15 minutes or whatever, a half an hour. And I do it every time. I write out an outline and I write down what I want to say. And, I don't say it always, but I have my even today, right? We've talked on Friday, so I knew the kinds of things that you would be asking, but I wanted to make sure that I had some outline. And so I think just preparation, I don't think that there's very few people who can just wing it and be short and sweet and entertaining and succinct all at once. And all of us have, different things we need to work on. For me, I have to work on being succinct because I can be pretty verbose and I can talk for quite a while. For someone else, it might mean they might need to work on being more engaging and more lively and more entertaining because they have a very serious, somber personality. Well, you don't want to be boring, right? So I just think it's very similar to conducting, and it's really public speaking. What you're doing is you're doing public speaking in front of a computer monitor, and it's really no different.
Great.
Except for you're sitting. Although the reason why I like doing it in the tasting room is I like to stand.
Okay. So is there a reason for that? Do you feel more
I don't know.
engaged?
I think I feel more comfortable. I'm not quite sure. For me, it's just my comfort level. I like to stand. I'd like to talk with my hands, and I feel like I'm able to maybe just be more expressive.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
I'm sure it's different for different people.
And so going back a little bit, one of the other, I guess it's not so much a question, but kind of a point that I wanted people to take away is that this hasn't been a huge investment for you, right? You mentioned a couple pieces of equipment, but you're utilizing the team that you already have at Dry Creek Vineyard. You didn't have to outsource talent. You didn't have to outsource experts in any field. And I feel like the few folks that I've talked to who are seeing successes like yourself are doing the same thing. They're using the talent. They're using the skill set that they already have. Do you want to talk about that at all?
Well, I know you hit the nail on the head. We spent, $120, I think, maybe. No, I think I bought a sound bar and that was another $59.
No, the sound bar we actually took from someone else's computer. So we literally took a sound bar off of a monitor. You would laugh if you saw our setup in the tasting room because I have a wooden box from one of our wines. We have our Endeavor Cabernet in a wooden box. And so I propped the laptop up on that. And then I have 2 Kleenex boxes right underneath because then the sound bar can fit there because the cord isn't long enough to reach to the ground. We usually in the tasting room, we're on a glass top table. Well, that makes a lot of noise if you clink your glasses. So I have a white dish towel that's out so that there's no noise from the glasses hitting. It's really kind of a comical setup that we have this light out there, extension cords running because there's never a plug where you need it. But it really just goes to show you that you can make it happen. However you need to, you can make it. And it might be a little bit clunky on the outside, but really what the visitors are seeing and the guests are seeing is right here. They don't, that's the most important thing. If you saw the rest of the room where Kim is, it's a beautiful room, but it has nothing to do with what is behind her right now. So having that staging and really using what you have, I think is your best asset.
So knowing everything that you've learned, kind of everything that you've talked about and everything that you learned, I touched on this a little bit when you were talking about the blitz, but you're having customers come into your tasting room. So you said you've had to move your background, your stage, if you will. And people are starting to go back to work. there's hope ahead. But do you think that virtual marketing is still something that you'll keep going forward? I mean, whether it's all in or a little bit here and there, or is it?
I do.
Yeah.
Ironically, we had talked many times about wanting to do virtual tastings for the consumers, and doing like some kind of maybe a food and wine pairing virtual tasting or a cheese and wine tasting. And we just never, nobody had time. We never got it off the ground. It was just sort of one of those pie in the sky ideas. And what the blessing of this for us is it catapulted us into, okay, we need to do this. We need to do it fast. We need to figure it out. And I think it's here to stay. I mean, now, this is with respect to consumers, we do new release tastings virtually. If they can't come to the winery, that's okay. Our hospitality staff, our wine educators are doing virtual tastings just like this with customers if they can't come here. I think we'll continue to do that for the trade. I don't think this is a technology that's going to go away. And I just want to touch on what you mentioned just a moment ago, Stacy. I think that especially if it's a small winery and somebody, maybe the owner operator or the winemaker, and they're not a techie, you'd be surprised. Maybe it's your bookkeeper that's got some familiarity with technology or Zoom, or it could be the maintenance guy, or it could be, the special events girl or guy. I mean, in other words, it doesn't have to be somebody from marketing and sales. It just needs to be somebody that can help set up the computer, troubleshoot any problems, give you feedback on, how do you look? Do you need lighting? Can you hear me? It's really just having kind of a friend to help you pull it off. Wouldn't you say?
Absolutely. Yeah. Well, and I would echo on your point, Stacy, about is this going to continue into the future? I would say, especially for wineries like us, which, we're a family-owned winery. We're truly independent. We're one of kind of the few remaining iconic family-owned wineries in Sonoma County. For us, everything is about relationships. So for the fact that I may go on half a dozen sales trips a year, but having this opportunity, I've had more engagement with all the different sales teams from around the country in the past 2 months. I've had more of that than I have for the past 2 years. Because a lot of times I'm limited to either being able to travel there or they have to come and travel to us. So by bridging the gap with these virtual tastings, it's just creating more of those relationships, which are really important to a winery like ours.
Right. Well said.
So those are kind of all of my questions. Is there anything else that you guys want to add, or any main takeaways from either of you that you want to make sure, you sat through this whole webinar with us? Remember this.
I wouldn't go it alone. I really think it's important not to do it all by yourself. I just think you need somebody to help. And it doesn't have to be an IT consultant. You don't need to hire anybody. These people are right under your own roof. So I think not going it alone is probably my number one recommendation. What about you, Sarah?
Yeah, I think for me, it's really find the gaps. It's not only looking at virtual tastings as a way to connect with your accounts and your retailers, but looking at your social media. Are you responding when they comment? Are you commenting on theirs? Look at your website. Do you have a retail store locator that you can point your consumers to? We were very quick and jumped on creating a restaurant takeout list for our restaurant accounts all over the country.
That's right.
So what gaps are there that you can fill without having to put in a lot of investment? Things that just take time and energy and concentration. And I think that's really a key to success in times like this. The people that will do the best and fare the best are the ones that are creative and are looking for solutions.
Excellent.
It's really ingenuity. It's that can-do attitude. We'll figure it out.
Thanks, Rocky.
Yeah.
All right, cool. Well, thank you guys for joining me today.